Am I focused in? Well. Welcome back to another episode of Joe Does a Lot of Things. I promised that I would be making a silk top tutorial to teach you guys how to make this top. You know, I think it's okay to start simple because we're all learning. And for those of you who keep saying, hey man, could you please upload your PDF of the pattern? No, because you're gonna have to learn to do it yourself, and I'm gonna teach you to do it yourself, so that way you can become a fashion designer like you always dreamed about. We're just gonna go ahead and get to it. This is pattern paper right here. This is, you know, like what fashion designers use to make patterns. If you don't have it, just go tape some, you know, regular paper together and we'll figure it out and it's gonna be all right. Go get some paper, get a pencil, get a ruler, whatever ruler you have works. These are the best ones because you can actually see all the markings for, you know, all the inches. Yeah, let's just get started. Pencil, ruler, paper. I hope you can hear me. Draw one long straight line. And at the end of it, mark 6.5 inches in height. That's 6.5 inches. Mark another one here, just to make sure things line up. 6.5 inches. And if you want to be safe, just go ahead and do one more. One more in the middle so you have a little connecting point to go through. Right there. So that's 6.5 inches. That also kind of confirms that everything is kind of squared up. So you don't want all these lines to just not be parallel. And you also want it to be 11 inches. Make sure it's lined up perfectly. Make sure it's squared off. I'm doing it relatively fast. So if you want to be someone who's a little bit more, you know, anal with it, then just take your time. Mark 11 inches now. That's 11 inches right there. And another 11 inches right here. Connect these 2 points. Booyah. And then go ahead and add seam allowance. You need to add a 1/2 inch around. So seam allowance, for those of you who don't know, is that extra bit of fabric you add onto a pattern so that when you sew it together, you have a space of fabric to sew together. You have something to attach. That's what seam allowance is for. So this is what you're gonna see. Seam allowance is what you're gonna add, which you won't see when the product is done. So go ahead and just add that now. There you go, 1/2 inch. And this is why this ruler is great. It's clear, it's easy to see what's going on. So, you know, buy one. 1/2 inch there, and a 1/2 inch there. And just to help you guys out, right there. There you go. Cut that out. Next, it's gonna need to be 22 inches wide by 1 inch in height. 1 inch. So height on this is 1 inch. And on this one, you don't need to add seam allowance. No seam allowance for the strap pattern piece, just 1 inch in height, 22 inches on the length. So length equals 22 inches. Yes. Okay, so now we're gonna do the bust piece. The bust piece is this part. Draw a straight line. So height here equals 4 6/8 inches. And the length is going to be 11 inches again. 4 6/8 in height, right? So do that across here. This is where a ruler like this really comes in handy because you never really have to worry about lining things up. So go ahead, connect these dots. Connect these lines at a point, make sure they're straightened. Cool, and then do another 11 inches here. So, we're not done yet. Cool. Okay, so this is where things get like a little bit more complicated. This is an example of what my final pattern piece for the bust area looks like. I don't know if it's gonna focus. These are our darts. Darts are pretty much the amount of fabric that you gather up and sew together to create like a curved shape in a flat piece. Because obviously you look at all these pattern pieces, they're flat. They're not gonna sit on a body normally. You gotta do something to them to add angles. You know, obviously for your bust area, people have different size boobs. It's just what it is. This pattern's probably not gonna fit everyone, especially since everyone's fucking different. You're kind of just gonna have to use your logic with what I teach you with these darts. Also, everyone's like nipple placement is different. I never thought I would say nipple placement in my entire life. It's different for everybody. So if you're putting it on and it feels kind of off, just pay attention to your body and look and think logically. If Joe marked it 2 inches in, I'm shaped differently from that original pattern. What do I add? Is it just another 1/2 inch for me? Is it another inch? It's just different for everybody. So you're just gonna have to try things out. But I'm gonna give you this base for what you can work with so that way you can work out from there. Doing this kind of like helps your mind get into that logical way of thinking where like If something doesn't fit, you're probably gonna have to add a little bit to the bottom. If it's sitting too low on the top, add some more to the top. If the darts aren't giving you enough space in here and it's sitting too flat and it's scrunching up, take a little bit more fabric in on the dart so that way it sits more angled. This is flat, the more dart you add, it starts to shape out like that. If you mess up, who cares? You get to try again. Make sure you're using like a cheap fabric or like, you know, grandma's quilts, whatever. This stuff takes a while to figure out, so you just kind of got to give it that effort. So yeah, don't give up. Right now what I'm about to show you is how to put the dart in. You know, it's gonna be fun. Make sure you mark things just to keep things simple. So this is the top, this is the bottom. So now, 2 2/8 from the top, mark a line with your pencil through that. Here we go. 2 2/8 down. Right there, in case you want to come back here and take a peek at it. 2 2/8. Mark a pencil line connecting those 2 points in the middle of this. So from this point on the end right here, mark 1 3/4 in. Just put a little mark. Just a tiny little mark, nothing serious, just so you know where it is. Do the same thing on the other side. From this point right here, this intersection, 5/8 up and 5/8 down. 5/8 up, 5/8 down. And then go ahead, take this right here and connect it. Put your pencil at this point and run it through this with a straight angle. Do the same thing over on this side. Cool, you got these two things now. So here's what you're gonna need to do that's kind of different and a little bit more difficult. Get your scissors and cut this thing out. Cut it with some extra space around the sides. This is where you're gonna need your hands, all right? So take this right here, and you're gonna need to fold the paper along these two lines. So these two crease dart lines right here that you drew, these angle lines, you're gonna need to pinch them and fold them and put them together. Take this right here, I fold it along here, fold along there, and now put them together along this line in the middle. Take this now and fold it, bring this line on the bottom to the line up top. So now you've connected them right here. Taking it, closing it up. So that way, this excess in the back is facing down towards the bottom. So once you've done that and you found a way to flatten this thing out over here, right? This is just a tracing wheel. If you don't have one, just use like a blunt, thin edge that you can push along something so that it traces it. You're gonna take it on this bottom line where that excess paper is behind it, and you're gonna run this tracing wheel over it. You undo it, and then as you can see right here, there's a little indented line right here because that's pretty much the shape you're gonna need on this extra part for it to sit normally when you put it on a body. So now that you've indented that, draw and mark a line over it. You can go ahead and add your seam allowance. Do the same thing to the other side, add that 1/2 inch. Got the bottom piece. It was 6.5 inches in height, 11 inches wide. This is just a basic square, or it's a rectangle. It's not a square. This is the bust piece, 4 6/8 in height, also 11 inches wide. But I also just showed you how you're supposed to go about adding this dart in. If you need to watch it again, go on back, take another peek at it, okay? This is the bust piece. One of these and one of these. Here's another thing that you need to know about how you're supposed to cut things, because once you take this and put it on fabric, you're gonna have to know if it's going with the grain or against the grain. So whenever you buy a piece of fabric, usually what you do is you line it up to cut long ways. So let's say a fabric is 10 feet long and it's, you know, like blah, 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 30 inches wide. Along the length of it, you're gonna have to take this thing and put it like that. We're gonna be doing something else with this piece of fabric called cutting it on the bias. And the bias is an angle that you're cutting it on. There's the width and then there's the length of the fabric, right? Normal, basic, obvious, north, south, northeast, west, south. Never eat sour watermelons. There you go. Right now what we're doing is we're marking the grain. This thing right here is gonna be on the bias. You take this right here, draw a straight line here, straight line across, so that way you have this intersection right here. Along the bias is you want something to be perfectly in between. It's gonna be on the exact angle. So I mark 1 inch right here and 1 inch by 1 inch there. So this is 1 inch by 1 inch and 1 inch by 1 inch, so that way you can draw a perfect angled line. So there you go. This angle right here is the bias angle, and so that way you cut it and it's gonna have a stretch to it. So that way when you put it on your bust, no matter what shape it is, it's gonna fall on it and be relatively nice. So this is a piece of fabric, right? This is the length. When you buy a piece of fabric, it's only a certain amount wide. This might be like 60 inches wide. This is the width. Between the width and the length, the angle is the bias. So this is the length, this is the width, on an angle is the bias. So that's what you're going to be needing to cut one of these pieces on. When I tell you you need to cut this body piece along the length grain, you take that and you're going to set it up on here like this. Not like that, like this. Yes. Also, for those of you who don't know, just to save money and save fabric and not blow all this money on some trials, you know, I recommend just getting some fabric you don't care about. This right here is muslin. It's cotton muslin. It's just like an undyed, really cheap form of fabric that, you know, everyone in the business kind of uses for samples. You don't have to use this. You can use anything, but this is just an easy, cheap way to go. So like I just showed you, this is the length right here, and this is the width. Normally you can tell the length grain by looking at the end. There's always like this different colored strip at the end, which is the selvage. That's where they close everything off. Take this angle line, and like I said, along the length, take this and make this line parallel to the edge. Now this thing is going to be on this angle right here called the bias. It gives it more stretch. This doesn't stretch this way, this doesn't stretch this way, but along these angles, it stretches. So that way when you put it over your bust area, you're gonna know that it fits, or it's at least gonna be more stretchy and comfortable. Take this, and you want this arrow right here to line up with this edge because it's going with the length. Cut 7 of these. So now, we've got these pieces, right? So, because it's your first time, we're gonna draw on it. And at this point where you drew these 2 lines to, this point right here, take this pen and push it in there very hard. Make sure that it goes through onto the fabric. Same thing over here on the other side. On that point where it intersects with the seam allowance line, right here, also push it through. So pretty much all you're trying to do is just trace what you have on the paper onto the actual piece of fabric. Make sure you put like a cross mark right here like this. Just a little cross mark so you know that that's the end of the point, because sometimes, you know, you draw too far and things get kind of a little messy. Draw this other line too. Do the same exact thing on this side over here. Now you can go ahead, take all these pins off and get that fabric piece free. You're not gonna need to do anything on here. There's no parts to mark, so you can just go ahead and unpin it. Cool. I spilled a little water on myself. It's not drool. It's definitely not drool. I said it's not drool. So what we're gonna go ahead and start doing now is putting this whole thing together. And in order to do that, we're gonna need a sewing machine, which I have. You see these lines? You're gonna match them. Fold this thing in half and line those lines up. So take your pins, make sure these things are lined up, and then push your pins through it. Make sure it's going through to the other side and you see it poking through the other line. My hand's so nimble. I don't know if you can see, I pinned it through. Match those lines up when you fold it, and then go ahead, and what you're gonna do is you're gonna sew along this line. Elmo's World. I'm about to sew the darts on this thing. I showed you how to pin them close together. You're pretty much just folding this thing in half and matching up the lines I told you to draw. Take your fabric, and when you start sewing, all you need to do is 2 stitches forward, 2 stitches back, and then go finish out the rest of the line. That locks it into place. 1, 2, and then reverse it. 1, 2. It went 3, but it's okay. As you sew, take out your pins because you don't want to break your needle, and go all the way to that point, but don't back tack on the point. Bring your needle up on your machine. Make sure you slide it out. Make sure you keep some thread at that point. And what you're gonna do is take that extra thread that you got here, hanging from that point that you just finished, and you're gonna tie it. 1, 2, I do 3 for good luck. Go ahead, pull that tight, and then you can cut away this excess thread. Never leave any hanging threads. Do the exact same thing to the other side. So for this episode, I'm not gonna be able to teach you guys all of the finishes you need to be doing stuff like this. This is a practice round. This is just about learning to sew, learning to be able to put things together. In the future, I'll come back in on here and I'll teach you guys how to do, like, you know, proper finishes. But for now, we're keeping it simple. So you're gonna take the bottom of this part, the bust piece, and then you're gonna take top side of this. So that way you're gonna connect them to have this seam in the middle, and you're gonna put right side to right side. So the side you see, the side with just the seam, not that extra fabric in the back, you're gonna take the bottom of it and you're gonna connect it to the other thing. So you're taking this piece and you're putting them together. So that way when you sew it together, that extra seam allowance and where all the fraying is gonna occur is on the inside where you won't see it, not on the outside. Like I told you before, the way you're supposed to anchor your stitch down is to just 2 stitches in, and then back 2 stitches, and then go the rest of the way. Since this is just a seam and not a dart, iron this inside part down so that way the seam on the outside is going to be nice and clean. We have these 2 pieces connected now. You've sewn the darts closed. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and just finish all the edges now, because when we do the straps, we're putting them on top of the finished edges for this model that we're doing. In the future, I'm going to teach you how to clean this part off, but for now, we're just trying to learn to sew, do the basics. We have a 1/2 inch seam allowance all the way around here. All we're trying to do is finish these edges right now. Fold this edge 1/4 of an inch, and then another 1/4 of an inch to have it a nice finish. All the way around, that's what we're going to do. We're not going to be sewing on this side, we're going to be sewing closer to here. What's up? Take this, fold that first 1/4 inch, iron it down. Oh, and then go another 1/4 inch right here. Now you see, and ironing it down just helps a lot. It keeps it in place, not the outer edge, so close to that inner edge of what you folded, so that way it kind of holds everything together and nothing falls out. And start somewhere where that double tack isn't going to be as visible, because when you're wearing it, someone's going to look and see that thicker stitch in a weird spot. So you want to put it somewhere where someone's not going to really notice it. Somewhere where you think it's going to be less obvious for someone to look at what you're wearing and, you know, see all those little extra details that you had to do just for, like, you know, the technical side of things. Go ahead, put that down. We're almost done. It's literally just about the straps now. Take the 7 straps and literally iron them in half. Not this way, I mean long way. Fold them like that and iron them all in half. Now what you're gonna go ahead and do is sew it at 1/4 of an inch. So 1/4 of an inch all the way down on all of them. I just finished sewing all 7 of these. Oof, indigestion. Finished sewing all 7 of these straps. So what you're gonna go ahead now is you're just gonna you're gonna go ahead and trim all of that excess fabric. There's obviously the side of it that's already naturally closed, the side that you folded on, and then there's the extra side where all that fraying is happening, where all that extra fabric is. Go ahead and trim all of that down on all 7 of them. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna go ahead and flip all of these straps inside out. Amazon sells like these turners. They're like these little hooks on like a long rod you can put through these things and catch the end and then pull it all the way through. I don't have one right now. I also lose shit pretty easily. Actually, no, I feel like I shouldn't put that out there, just to let you know that I'm really irresponsible. But because of that, I just use these skewers. So these aren't as easy, but they're still pretty good. And if you lose stuff a lot, this is a great way to go because they're cheap. Cheap as shit, actually. Use the blunt end, because if you use the sharp end, it's just gonna slide right through. Take your strap, and you're just gonna have to sort of catch the end of it, just a little piece of the end, and then push it through. It's not gonna be easy at first. You gotta meddle with it. Ah, there we go. Sometimes it'll lose what you caught, and it'll just slide in. You just gotta fidget with it. Ooh, there we go. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. That's right. Push! Put. I wasn't trying to reference childbirth, because that would be a weird thing to joke about, and I wasn't. Go section by section. That's what I'm talking about. Pull this thing on out, and then you have yourself an inside out strap, or a right side in strap. And then you should just go on the iron and just iron it down. So you're gonna have to go ahead and do that for all 7 of these straps now. So my thumbs are, oh god, because you're just like pulling the whole time. Anyways, right before you iron it down so that it kind of sticks this in place too, you don't want this to be raw. I'm flipping you off by accident. I'm sorry. Push that raw edge that's there, just poke it in a little bit. Go iron them down real quick. Yeah, go do that. All 7 of these are ironed right now. You've got the straps, you've got the body piece. So now what we're gonna do, you're gonna take 2 of these straps, right? And you're gonna wanna put them behind these top 2 corners right here. So you have 2 straps that go over your shoulders, just like that. Boom. Over the shoulders. You have a 1/2 inch seam allowance on everything. So you have a 1/2 inch amount of space at a 1/2 inch on this strap right here. Just put a little mark, a 1/2 inch in from the end. So that way, put it behind this right here and just line up that 1/2 inch mark with the edge of the fabric right here. So that way you just know where to put it. Do the same thing on both corners. Cool, so now you have these 2 straps that are going vertical, right? You're gonna take one of your straps and here's what you're gonna do. You're gonna mark 3 inches. Ready? Boom. That's 1 3-inch strip. Now you need a second 3-inch strip. Is you're gonna take 2 of these straps right here, and you're gonna mark 3 inches in here. Mark 3 inches in, You got 3 inches and 3 inches marked. Take this 3-inch piece, and what you're gonna do is you're just gonna take the end of it and you're gonna put it here and line it up with that 3-inch mark. Put this on your sewing machine and sew this piece to this piece at that 3-inch mark. I just sewed these things on. And since we just made these, you have 2 points to connect to the sides. You're gonna put this one right here along the seam. So same thing, 1/2 inch in, but just along that seam so it's perfectly lined up. Take the top one, same thing, along the top, 1/2 inch in, and you're gonna sew both of these points down right here on the other side. And you want the actual long strip part to be on the bottom. So you want the long strip to be here, so that way it continues up and goes around. And the short strip that you added onto it to connect to the top point right here. We're gonna take our last 2 straps, take these 2 and put them right on top and sew them down, and then you're done. Woo! Whenever I do this, I feel really lame. I think it's because it is lame. So we're done. I hope you were able to follow all that. So we got all the straps on here. If I was a girl and I could fit this properly. This strap right here, put it over your shoulder. You would take the strap that's connected to this triangle you did, and you would tie it to this strap so it would be tying around your arm. The last 2 straps that you added, that are behind the triangle straps that you put on, you would tie at your back right here. This just looks like I put on a baby apron. Like I said, everyone fits differently into certain things. This pattern is specific, custom made to my girlfriend. So of course, everyone's shaped different. It might not fit, and just keep trying things. Use cheap fabrics so that way you're not wasting money on this. It's a lot of trial and error. If you feel like this boob area is too flat, I know this kind of look can be a little bit skimpy, but like try it. Who cares? We're in quarantine. If you want to wear things that you normally wouldn't, now's the time. I hope it was fun. I hope it was simple. If you struggle, let me know what parts you didn't really understand so in the future I can maybe be more mindful of that. Thanks for watching.